God of War Ragnarok got a DLC a couple weeks back, seemed to drop out of nowhere. I don't care much for roguelikes, so I didn't pay much attention to it right away, but after seeing everyone raving over it, I had to try it out for myself. So what did I think as a fan of God of War, but not so much of a fan of roguelikes? Well, let's get into it.
Locked.
I don't suppose you'll take that as our cue to turn around and leave?
Welcome back to JBG. Today we're looking at the God of War Ragnarok DLC Valhalla on the PS5. I'm doing something I don't normally do and hopping on a video right after I get done playing something. But I needed to test out a new mic before Robocop, and Valhalla just caught me off guard, so I wanted to talk about it. Let me start by reiterating, I'm not much one for roguelikes. I don't like losing progression in games, so that's why I slept on this when it first came out. But oh my fuck. This is so much more than just a cut and paste add-on mode to the main game. I'm talking about returning characters, returning weapons, and I'm not just talking about from Ragnarok or 2018 here.
That sword isn't something full of terrible memories, I hope.
What do you think?
So here's the obvious but required spoiler warning. Valhalla is an epilogue to Ragnarok, so talking about the story setup here is going to obviously contain some spoilers for Ragnarok. I'm going to leave most of them as contextual as I can, and I'm not going to elaborate too much on the main game spoilers. But just know there are going to be contextual spoilers throughout this video. So the DLC opens up with Kratos and Mimir rowing up to a shore and talking about a mysterious invitation to what turns out to be Valhalla. Kratos, being Kratos, just walks up and brute forces his way in. This doesn't end up working out too well for him, and when they both die, they end up back out on the shore they just arrived on. Except now Freya's here and brought along a couple of her Valkyries. The Valkyries and Freya give a crash course on what they need to do to get through Valhalla.
Valhalla draws from the memories of those who enter. In there, you're an open book. Sure, you want to go back in?
And this is where you find out that Freya's asked Kratos to be the god of war for her council, basically filling the spot Tyr once filled for the realm. He told her he needed to think on it, and facing his past through fighting his way through Valhalla is part of the process.
A game is not his purpose. There is something here I must see through.
And what is that exactly?
Process.
I don't want to spoil where this goes, but let me just say, this was so much more than I thought we were getting with this add-on. I personally thought Ragnarok wrapped up Kratos' redemption arc pretty well. But Valhalla ups the ante, and it goes all in on this redemption arc, with a few big surprises along the way.
Do not panic!
Being a roguelike, this isn't going to play or progress like the main campaign at all. It has entirely different mechanics here. Before I get into the mechanics though, a quick word from our sponsor.
This video is sponsored by my day job. All views and opinions are my own. Likes and subs are appreciated. But don't hit the notification button. Does anybody actually even do that? Seems annoying. Don't do that.
So obviously, if you brought all your upgrades and gear over from the main game, there would be progression and balancing problems for the format they're using here. This being the literal Valhalla, there isn't really even much explanation required. Valhalla has a will of its own, and Kratos building himself up as he goes through it is part of that will. So much like other roguelikes, you're going to start each run with some basic selection of your fury and the shield that you want to take in on the run. You maintain the same weapons from Ragnarok here with the axe, blades, and spear, but everything is back at a base level.
Something is wrong. I feel weaker.
And all the armor and weapon upgrade skins are just that. It's all aesthetic. As you progress through the run, you pick up disposable currency in fleeting echoes. These are used to buy upgrades for your abilities you collect, or certain perks for the run. Eventually you start picking up standing currency in the mastery seals. That'll be used back on the shore after the run to permanently upgrade Kratos, and buy some other options for the next Valhalla run. This all sounds pretty standard, and for the most part, it is. These are smaller levels that link to each other as you would expect, and you'll get to know them very well by the time you roll credits. They're going to be familiar from the main game, but on a much smaller scale. But they're also going to send some throwbacks your way too. Then there's the expected challenges, from taking a specific shield or rage selection for the run for extra mastery seals, to specific combat challenges of using certain attacks or skills a certain amount of times. The idea being that you'll start to build Kratos up each time you die, or each time you complete a run as the story progresses. The story's done a lot like the main campaigns, with dynamic conversations explaining the vast majority of what's going on, but there's still a few cutscenes here or there before the final one that makes this feel like so much more than just a cheap DLC like I was expecting. I will say playing it on the standard difficulty felt a little too easy at the beginning, but let's also say I didn't need to turn up the difficulty as I went on. As you progress, so does it, but it's still a very approachable roguelite that does have an easy option for players that aren't as good at the combat. And I feel like they'll still get a bit of a challenge come the closing runs, even on the easier difficulty. Once again, I'm on the longer average playtime than what most people are saying. I've heard people get through it from the lower end of about 6 hours to the higher end of about 10. It took me about 12 with a couple OP runs after that just for fun. The technical quality is right up here with Ragnarok, just as I would expect from Santa Monica Studios. But although this is an extremely polished add-on, there's a couple cons to go along with all my praise of this thing. First being, if you get bored quickly of the same settings, well, this is going to bug you pretty fast. For the format, it doesn't bug me much. I already mentioned you're going to get very familiar with each level as you go on. And the enemy variety is a double-edged sword here. You're going to see some awesome throwbacks to enemies that were so great to see in the modern setting, but you're also going to be fighting the same things over and over again with the exception of bosses. They did really well on changing that up. I'm not sure I even saw a repeat of a boss outside of the story-related repeats that'll make sense once you play it. That's the point of this format though, fighting through similar runs each time trying to get further and seeing a lot of the same enemy types as you go. And this could be a turnoff for people not a fan of the genre. What kept me going though, is that even up to the additional runs after I rolled credits, there were dynamic story moments that kept unfolding, and an entire story arc with Mimir that I didn't even realize I hadn't finished until I saw a video after I was done. This also means you might miss quite a bit of it if you blast through it on a lower difficulty without the resets expected from dying. I'd say most of the cons here are just tied to the format. Though this is also much more forgiving than the normal game in the genre, I found it all actually fit pretty well after I got a few runs in and saw how it was all working together. I always like to talk about a price point recommendation on games I play. And you might ask, what's even the point if it's a free download for anyone that already has Ragnarok? Well, I just picked up the Final Fantasy 16 DLC for $10. And although I don't know if that's worth it yet, as it's still in my backlog, I would have honestly paid at least that for this DLC for the time I got out of it, and I wasn't expecting the depth that was here, and it was well worth the playthrough. So although I've made it a point to try and be as vague as I can outside of the basic story setup itself, it's because I 100% recommend this for anyone who is a fan of the God of War franchise and don't want to ruin some of the best thoughtful throwbacks I've seen in I'm not sure how long. Especially for anyone who felt like we needed more tie-ins to the original trilogy than what we've gotten to this point. This is completely a love letter from Santa Monica Studios to the fans of the franchise. And not a cheap add-on mode like I originally expected. They put some legitimate time and thought into this, and it made me love this franchise just that much more. Let me know down in the comments if you played through Valhalla and what you thought of it. Until next time.
Kratos, the threat of death in there is real.
That is good to know.
If by good you mean wildly disconcerting.
What? Toodaloo, motherfucker.